Should they follow
CDC
guidelines?
On my team, the CDC guidelines are just that, meant to be flexible and meant to be applied as appropriate for the situation.
What happens if there's an outbreak? What are experts telling you about the appropriate level of transmission for a school before it has to shut down?
Well, I know that that's an area that the CDC is helping to provide further insight into. I can't, as a non-physician or a non-medical expert, tell you precisely what to do in the case of one child in a classroom or five children in a classroom. But the key is every school should have plans for that situation to be able to pivot and ensure that kids can continue learning at a distance if they have to for a short period of time.
You're the Secretary of Education. You're asking students to go back. So why do you not have guidance on what a school should do just weeks before you want those schools to reopen? And what happens if it faces an outbreak?
You know, there's really good examples that have been utilized in the private sector and elsewhere, also with frontline workers and hospitals. And all of that data and all of that information and all of those exampsts can be referenced by school leaders.
But I'm not hearing a plan from the Department of Education. Do you have a plan for what students and what schools should do?
So schools should do what's right on the ground at that time for their students and for their situation. There is no one uniform approach that we can take or should take nationwide.
But can I just ask you,
because the needs of a school in the city of Detroit are very, in my home state, in the city of Detroit, would be very different than that of a school in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
And that's the point. That's completely understandable. But you are arguing over and over that they should handle this on a local level. But at the same time, as the Secretary of Education, you are trying to push them to do a one-size-fits-all approach, which is go back and reopen schools. You can't have it both ways.
I am urging all schools to open and to be providing their students a full-time education. Find a school that is going to open and is going to serve their children. Is the threat to withhold
funding still alive or not? Yes or no?
We are committed to ensuring students are in school and learning. And parents need to have the flexibility and the resources to be able to take their kids to a school that, if their school refuses to open or doesn't serve their student.
Answer. You didn't answer the question, but I appreciate you coming on this morning.
Because nothing should put parents at ease more than knowing that the Secretary of Education has zero plan to safely reopen schools in this country in the middle of a global pandemic. Although in her defense, it's not like she's had 6 months to deal with this. Right off the bat, DeVos claims that the CDC guidelines are meant to be flexible. Of all times to waffle on protection, I'm not sure it's in the middle of a pandemic raging across the country. Just a hunch, but this might not be the time to hold a laissez-faire attitude towards sending kids to school. And I don't think America's parents exactly appreciate the Secretary of Education sowing doubt in the only agency tasked with ensuring public health. As if it was bad enough that the rest of this administration has deprioritized safety, the fact that DeVos is now trying to diminish the CDC is just the peak of irresponsibility. But the issue at the heart of this is that all at once, DeVos is claiming that all schools should reopen in September, but also that there's not one uniform situation and that all schools should deal with their unique situations. In other words, she's talking out of both sides of her mouth. You can't go around screeching about how all schools should reopen and then in the same breath pretend that you care about each school following a unique protocol. It's that very mixed messaging that has led to confusion from this White House since day one of the outbreak. This statement by DeVos is a microcosm for this administration's failed leadership on coronavirus since January. By the way, the reason that DeVos is digging in on this idea that all schools have to reopen is because it follows the same denialism that has become the administration's blueprint regarding the virus. This is what Trump has done for everything. He claimed that businesses should fully reopen before it was safe, only to lead to massive outbreaks that only forced them to close down again. He even railed against stay-at-home orders and fomented protests, only to see coronavirus cases spike within the people who attended those protests. And now, right on cue, he's claiming that schools need to be fully reopened, not because it's safe, but because it lends itself to the same exact denialism that has guided every decision the White House has made thus far. Finally, DeVos is asked whether the threat that she and Trump have made to withhold funding to schools that refuse to reopen is still on the table. And while she refused to actually answer the question, she did manage to use the opportunity to promote school choice. Keep in mind, DeVos's billionaire husband owns and operates a charter school, and her political goal has always been funneling money away from public schools and into for-profit charter schools that enjoy little oversight and often a much higher failure rate. In other words, the billionaire charter school owner is using her own botched handling of a pandemic to advocate for an issue that she'd personally profit from. Surprising from someone in the Trump administration, huh? And look, I understand that this is a difficult issue. I understand that it's difficult or impossible for many parents to work if kids are at home. I understand that kids themselves aren't able to get the same quality education through distance learning. I understand that there are a host of issues associated with not being in the classroom. And of course, the ultimate goal should be getting kids back in class. But it doesn't take a genius to be able to acknowledge that those things are secondary to the immediate safety of children. Period. And so knowing the risks associated with this virus and understanding the health and safety of our children should be our #1 priority, it is irresponsible that the default position here by Betsy DeVos is that all schools should reopen. This is a fundamental failure to grasp the reality of this outbreak by a person whose sole priority should be the safety of school children and not pandering to Donald Trump. And yet that hasn't stopped her from deferring to him and her own wallet over America's kids every single time. And don't forget to listen to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I'll take a deep dive into the biggest issues of the week and interview major players in the world of politics, like Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Beto O'Rourke, Eric Swalwell, Katie Porter, and many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.